This Choircast podcast is brought to you by the Quantum Sayings of Jesus, Decoding the Lost Gospel of Thomas by Keith Giles, available now on Amazon in Kindle and paperback. Buried around 340 AD, unearthed in 1945, and translated into English in 1959, the Gospel of Thomas has been studied, debated, and analyzed by dozens of scholars and historians searching for clues about the meaning of these cryptic sayings of Jesus. In the Quantum Sayings of Jesus, author Keith Giles offers a look at the text from the perspective of non-duality and divine oneness. Check it out on Amazon today.
Welcome to the Unbelief Podcast, your journey, actually our journey together beyond inherited beliefs to a spirituality that works for you. I'm your host, Jeremy. I'm a deep skeptic, also a pastor. We can fix that later, right? No? Damn. All right, you've joined us for another Drinks and Deconstruction. Today, we are talking with Peaceful Nick the Medium. And, I know it's the middle of the day. We aren't day drinking today. But if we were having drinks and talking about all of this, what would be your drink of choice?
Ooh, I would have coffee, actually.
Okay. No, I totally get that. Any specific kind of coffee? Are you like a coffee connoisseur?
Well, I used to own a coffee shop.
Oh, wow. Okay.
In Lake Tahoe, and years ago, 20 years ago. And I like 90% coffee with a little hot chocolate in it.
That sounds really yummy. Yeah, I think if I had gone to your coffee shop, I would have ordered. So I judge all coffee shops on this single drink, and then I'll order other things. But my drink of choice to see like how good the coffee shop is, in my opinion, is a cortado. I get a cortado, and it's something that I can taste the beans. And if they can't deal with the milk, right? All the things, because I'm a nerd about everything. Anything that I like, I go way too deep. So we would be having coffee together, coffee drinks. I'd love to start really where you are right now today. When you think about spiritual beliefs, practices that are working for you right now, what's working for you? What seems like it's helpful?
I do pray to what I define as God or a collective consciousness.
Okay.
I do what mediums call sitting in the power, where I connect with my spirit guides, which as a scientist, I did not believe was real before I was a medium.
Right.
And I do communicate with my guides every day in some way for some amount of time. It varies depending on my schedule. And I learn to surrender, even though we all have challenges and bumps in the road where we are like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And we may ruminate on some things. But then when you get your head together, you're like, I just need to surrender to this. The universe, AKA God, is going to take care of us. And I just have to let it flow. And so I'm trying to be in a flow state spiritually as much as possible.
Yeah. Can you say a little bit more about the flow state? What does that mean? Like if somebody was trying to understand if they've ever experienced that, like what would they be looking for?
So a couple of things, and I hope I remember the second thing before I go through it. One is, I imagine, because my master's degree is in astronomy, I am very connected to the universe and have been my whole life, just physically, scientifically. I imagine the flow of all of the energy in the universe that is so much more vast than we are coming through the top of my head and through my body to allow all of the good energy to come through and to just delete, so to say, all of the bad energy out my feet. And so I allow the good energy to come in. But a good example for people who may not understand how it feels to be in the flow state is If you're writing a paper or you are talking to someone about something you love very much, and
Yeah.
you're just rambling on or typing on, and it's just coming out and coming out without
Mhm.
stopping, and you don't know where that information's coming from,
Yeah.
you're in the flow state. It's coming
Okay.
through you very easily, seamlessly. It's
Mhm.
just coming out into whatever, either talking or writing or whatever. It's
Yeah.
just flowing like a river, beautifully, flawlessly, easily.
Yeah. I experienced that in writing, and yeah, those that I access that most quickly when I start writing. Either if I'm free writing, I'm writing a book. I wrote a novel that has yet to be released, and all of that. Like I'm here for that. So we'll get to the medium.
Okay.
We will. I feel like we have to get to science before the medium, but where did it all start? Like for you, was there a specific moment where you started questioning your faith? I know that you told me before we got started that you grew up Catholic. So where did the unraveling start for you?
I am extremely curious and always
Mm,
have been about everything. I wanted to know every answer. I was the kid that drove everybody crazy with 10,000 questions a day. I wanted to know the answer to every single thing ever.
right.
And so I really excelled in science and mathematics through school. And so
Right.
because of my science side, I thought, well, how can this God stuff be real?
Right. Yeah.
I can
Especially
solve.
because a lot of more conservative religious groups, including, in Catholicism, there are both conservative and progressive sides. And I know that the conservative sides of Catholicism, much like evangelicalism, are very much pit science and religion against each other, which is funny for Catholicism because like their track record with that, AKA Galileo, like we just like they haven't had a good track record.
Right. And they have forgotten that.
Right.
Google the Pontifical Academy of Sciences. That's
Right.
like they do train a lot of scientists. But I forgot what your question was.
When did it start to unravel? You were talking
Oh,
about you were always scientific and that sort of, you felt like, okay, what about this God stuff?
okay. So I would always be like, well, if this science stuff is real, how can this God stuff be real? And
Right.
then I just went back and forth through my teen years. I went to a Catholic high school, attended church regularly, got married. My kids were baptized in the church.
Yeah.
Got renewed our vows in the church when I was
Hmm.
15 years into my marriage. But I always went back and forth. Like, it doesn't make sense that this mythical person, God, I always believed Jesus was a real person. I never
Right. Okay.
have ever questioned that for 1 second, and I never would. But the idea of an afterlife and God it didn't make sense in the scientific realm.
Yeah.
And I went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth for years. And then I found a video by Father George Coyne, who's a PhD astronomer,
Uh-huh.
and Richard Dawkins. And I watched that series. Father George Coyne's a Catholic priest, and Richard Dawkins, famous atheist. And they were
Yeah.
just having this discussion about science and God. And that really changed my mind about how you can believe in science or follow a scientific path and
Right.
also believe in God.
Yeah.
And I went back to being a believer for a very long time. And that's probably been 15 or 20 years or so that I've
Okay.
been on this side, the beliefs.
Yeah. So how did you, and it was just these videos, right?
I just was at work doing some work and listening to basically what we would call a podcast today.
Right.
And it just changed my mind. It just was that powerful to me.
Yeah. That's really amazing. And so you said you're a scientist.
Yes.
Tell us about that. How did you get there?
So I wanted originally to have a physics and engineering degree
Okay.
undergraduate. But when I moved to another state. They didn't have what I wanted for the degree.
Uh-huh.
So
'Cause that happens.
I opted
Schools
for,
are hard
yeah,
like that.
I opted for biology bachelor's degree because what I wanted to study was astrobiology because I'm a Mars expert. I'm a subject matter
Oh,
expert on
very
Mars.
cool.
Yeah. And so my side job is finding aliens, technically. Life on Mars is my field.
Uh-huh.
So I
Oh,
got
that's
a
cool.
bachelor's degree in biology and then a master's degree in astronomy. And so I
Oh,
still
wow.
work for a Humans to Mars nonprofit organization, and I
Uh-huh.
still do educational outreach. I'm the director of education programs for the Mars Society. But I
Very cool.
also, yeah, it's a worldwide wonderful organization.
Yeah.
I've been with them since 2012, so
Wow.
many years. And I just love science. It's in me. I cannot stop doing the spiritual stuff or the science stuff. I have prayed. I have asked my guides. I have like,
Right.
which way am I supposed to go? Because this seems kind of crazy to go back and forth every other day.
Right.
And so far, I'm still balancing both. And I kind of like the fact that the science keeps me grounded in reality.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. I can see how that can be like anchoring for you, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't even know. Like, so like you are to hear someone who is a subject matter expert in something sciencey, right? And is a medium. I mean, that feels like a complete contradiction. So how did you become a medium, and how does one become a medium? I guess maybe that's where to start, because I have no idea.
I had no idea either. I am just as shocked that it happened to me as you are hearing this right now. I was going along in my happy little life with my Mars job and teaching science and just living my life. My kids were grown, and I got a phone call one day from my sister, who's our lifelong friend who I hadn't seen for 25 years because I had moved. Her son died suddenly. He was 25 years old. I saw him once as an infant, and then I moved across the country and lost touch. And my sister called and said, and I have permission from the family to share this story.
Okay, good.
Nobody get mad out there.
Okay, good.
My sister called and said, Brandon died. Now,
that's your friend that you hadn't seen in years.
Brandon's the son that died of the friend that I had.
Right. Okay, got it.
And immediately in my head, I knew it was a drug overdose. Now, I knew nothing about this person. I had never seen him except once as an infant. That's it.
Yeah.
Had no contact at all. But that happened to me all the time. I always knew things that I thought everybody else knew and didn't know that that's not normal until later.
Right.
And so I laid down a little while later to take a nap. And I wasn't laying there, 10, 30 seconds. I mean, just a few seconds. And in my head, I could see him as clear as I can see you on the screen now.
Wow.
Color, red sweater, gold chain, black hair. And he said, tell my mom I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do it.
Oh, wow.
And it was so shocking. Nothing like that had ever happened in that way, that dramatically.
Right.
So shocking. Obviously, I couldn't take a nap.
Right. No, the nap was
got
over.
My heart rate up. Yeah. And I sat up and I'm like, what was that? It was so intense and overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I called my sister. I go, oh my gosh, you're never going to believe what happened. I ended up talking to his mother, verifying a couple days later. They found out it was a drug overdose that he passed from. And I've given her a couple readings since I became a trained medium. But after that first incident, I just kind of blew it off and went on with my life.
Yeah.
I didn't do anything about it. A few months later, my friend of the family, my son was with her. She was an elderly woman who had a head injury. And she had been on hospice care at home. She was end of life care. She was perfectly
Right.
healthy, but she fell and hit her head. And so she caused her a brain injury.
Yeah.
And my son was with her at the time of her passing. And that day, she kept showing me this red heart in my head. And it was relentless. Just this red heart with her name on it repeatedly, bright red in my head. And I texted my son, Isaiah.
Right. Yeah.
And I said, Dottie was her name. She will not stop showing me this red heart, and I don't know what to do. I can't sleep. I can't think. I can't eat. She's just showing me over and over. And immediately he sent me a picture of a red heart with her name on it that he had just picked up after her passing.
Oh,
this all happened within like a couple hours of her passing. And my knees buckled. I'll never forget it. I was standing in the kitchen. My hand was on the stove. I looked at the picture and I almost fainted in my kitchen.
Wow.
Because it was verifying that I had something happening that I couldn't explain scientifically.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
what's that like as a scientist?
I thought I needed a CAT scan.
Right. Of course. Did you get one?
I didn't even know
what
to do. Like, what do I do? Who do I talk to? All my friends were scientists.
Right.
Who's going to help me?
When you're a scientist and you start having these sort of like weird, and I don't mean to, I hope I am not disrespectful, but I would say most people would call it weird spiritual experiences. Like, what do you do? Where did you go with that?
I went to YouTube.
Of course, right? As
and
one does.
I think at some point I realized it was mediumship. I don't know.
Okay.
I talked to somebody. I don't remember all those details.
Yeah.
But I went to YouTube and I was just looking for someone who could talk about it in a way that I would understand it. So I didn't know what was happening because I really was worried about myself.
Yeah, I bet.
And I found, there's a bunch of people on there. And I found a mentor in the UK, and I thought, I'm going to do a scientific experiment with myself.
Ooh, okay. What was so what is the experiment?
I'm going to take mediumship classes. And if I am a medium, I'll follow the scientific method. If this is repeatable, then it's real. Because part of the scientific method is you have a hypothesis.
Yes.
Repeat the experiment. If it's repeatable and you keep getting the same results, true. And so that's what I did. I took a bunch of classes back to back. I was doubling up, tripling up in some cases. And
I mean, like, you just glossed over the fact that you said you took mediumship classes, right? Like, what happens in a mediumship class? Like, what are you studying? What do they say to you?
I became a certified mediumship teacher also during.
Well, then this is even a better question to ask you. Like, what is it like? I'm going to take a mediumship class. I don't even know A, what that means. And like B, what am I going to study?
I didn't know. I had no idea. I knew nothing. I was absolutely had no idea. But now I know. You learn about your extrasensory perceptions, your clairs, they call them. Clairvoyance.
Okay. Yeah, like
clairvoyance. Probably heard clairvoyance. That's clear seeing.
Right.
Clairaudience is clear hearing.
Right.
Claircognizance, which is what I always had but didn't know I had, is clear feel. Excuse me. Claircognizance is clear knowing, where you just know information. Like a mother has an instinct that something's happening to her child.
Right.
That's like claircognizance. So you learn about your clairs. You learn the difference between what a medium does, which is talk to spirits, and what a psychic does, which is talk to the person in front of them about their life. So if I was giving you a psychic reading, which I don't do specifically professionally, I would tell you about your life.
Okay.
I was giving you a mediumship reading, I would connect to your loved ones in spirit and give you messages and prove that their life goes on beyond this life.
Okay.
So you learn how to.
I hear that.
mind connect.
I hear you saying this. I and yet I'm also a science nerd. Those are really great things. How just take one of the clairs.
Okay.
How do you like practically what do you do when you are learning about it or developing it?
So, for example, clairvoyance.
Okay.
Let's say,
Which again, for those people who have
Clear
just heard it
seeing.
once, clear seeing.
all right,
And
let's-
what is that experience? Clear seeing means
I see things, you can see things inside your head, or you
uh-huh,
can see things outside your head.
like in
I
the real
have-
world.
Right. Like people say they see a ghost.
Okay, right.
That's
right,
clairvoyance. You can
Okay.
see the ghost.
right.
I see things inside my head superimposed on the wall in front of me.
Okay, great.
Kind
So
of like
so when you were doing that, like what's step one? Like
All right.
how do you learn about that? Like what do you do to develop that ability?
one example is like, I have this little card here. This is an oracle
Okay.
card, and there's a picture on the back. So you would practice.
Uh-huh.
You would try to tell me what color, what shape, what object is on the card, and you would constantly. Yeah.
Like at the beginning of Ghostbusters.
I don't remember the beginning.
Uh-huh. He has a card and he's looking at it and the person across from him.
Same
yeah.
thing.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
Cool.
So you do practice this thing, same thing with clairaudience. You know, you listen to music and you say you listen to the song Jeremy by Pearl Jam.
Oh yeah.
And
Jeremy spoken. Yes.
that's the inspiration for my son's name, by the way. Jeremy.
Oh, that's great.
And you listen to the drums only when you listen to the song. And then the next time you listen, you only listen to the guitar. And,
Okay.
in your head, you just kind of concentrate,
Uh-huh.
focusing that. Now, for me, I was older when I became a medium. I was in my late 40s. So
Okay.
I already had all these senses and didn't know. So it didn't take me long to develop them.
Okay.
Within 6 months, my mentor said, "You're ready to do professional readings," which is unusual. That's really
Yeah.
fast. Most people don't get to do that fast. But
So
I already had it and I didn't know I had it. It went
right.
really fast for me.
So basically in which of the clairs do you have? You have clairvoyance, right?
I have claircognizance, which is clear knowing, clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience. That's feeling.
Right.
There's clear smelling and clear tasting, which I get about 1% of the time.
Okay. So here's a question. Like, do you have to be, when you're talking about like when you were practicing looking at an oracle card, for example, and your mentor would be holding it and you would be saying what you saw. Like, do you have to do that in person? Does it work? Like when you do these readings, like how does that go?
I was entirely trained on Zoom because she was in the UK, and I've done 95% of my readings on Zoom.
Okay. So if I'm looking at something right now, do you have to have like a whole state? You've got to get prepared. We can't do this like immediately, like go.
I probably
I'm assuming
could,
you
but,
have to like actually prepare yourself for this.
It depends. Mediumship is the hardest for me to get to, not the hardest, but I need the most time to prepare because I take it so seriously.
Right.
I need to do a full meditation, but something like looking at an object in front of you, like maybe you're looking at a red apple or something.
Right.
And that's a psychic link.
Okay.
That's me reading your mind.
Okay.
Not a person in spirit. So that's a different technique, I guess you could say. But I think I'm underplaying the showing you the card and doing the exercise. There's so much more than that in these classes. Basically, you have to do readings in every single class because you're not going to learn anything unless you're doing readings.
I see.
So you do the reading and then you get critiqued, and then because every single person in the class is different. So it's not like learning your ABCs.
Right.
Everybody has to learn their ABCs, but every medium connects differently and every spirit gives their information differently.
Okay.
So when the medium connects and does their practice reading,
right,
then the teacher gives the critique. Okay, you need to work on clairaudience, or you need to keep your eyes open, or you need to have less, don't cry during a reading, because sometimes it's very emotional.
Yeah, I'm sure they can. So we deleted something out of this just because there were personal things, but Peaceful Nick the Medium said that she sensed my grandmother here, which was cool. And we got to talk a little bit about my grandmother. And, I think that like, even who knows whether or not, and whether or not all of that is exactly right or what's going on in the spiritual realm. But like, I think it's healing to, even if it's not true, even if it's not accurate, there's healing around, the idea of talking to my deceased relatives, right? And I think that, some version of ancestor veneration has been part of really every faith tradition in one way or another, even if it was resisted by the establishment, right? So like in the Bible, you have mediums that are active that people visit, but then there's places where it says like, don't do that, right?
And it's interesting that you brought that up, because I just jotted down as you were beginning that sentence about praying to saints, God, Mary. The Catholics always say pray to saints. I don't know if other Christian denominations do that. But if we're to pray to Jesus, we're talking to Jesus. If we're to pray to God, we're talking to God. Right. Jesus is not in human form on earth right now. Right. So if we're praying to Jesus, even if he ascended full-bodied into heaven, we're praying to his spirit, his soul. Yeah. So my answer to people who say, you're praying to demons, you're talking to demons, is all Christian religions I'm aware of say, pray to God, pray to Jesus, pray somebody who's not living anymore. Yeah. So if we're praying, we're talking to them. Yeah. Why is that any different if I'm praying to Mary, the mother of God, quote unquote? Right. Why is that different than talking to your grandma or my friend's son, or my other friend's grandma? Right. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that personally.
Well, I hope not, since you're a medium, right? That would be a very difficult psychological place for you to be in. So I just would love to hear. I will get off of the medium thing. I promise. We will keep going with your story, but so you talk, when you were talking about this, you used the term spirit guides. What is that? Do they have names? Are they specific people, or are they non-people? Like what is that?
Okay. First of all, you can talk to me about mediumship as long as you want.
Okay, great.
Spirit guides. Now I have a story about, oh my God, my ear started ringing.
Okay.
That's when they're talking. That sounds insane, but that happens to me when there's something important happening. My ear starts to ring. I did not believe in spirit guides. I thought it was total BS. Right. I'm a scientist. I thought it was crazy. Right. My mentor said, your homework is talk to your spirit guide, ask them for a sign, report next class. And I go, okay, this is the biggest crock I've ever heard, but do my scientific method. Right. I'm going to go through and find my spirit guide. Okay. I'll tell you the story and then I'll explain all about spirit. Okay. So I said, okay, it was March. I'll never forget it. So it wasn't during Christmas, because I asked for a snow globe. Show me a snow globe. Okay. Okay. Which you're not going to see in March.
Right. You're not going to see it for sure.
So I'm scrolling Instagram. I see a psychic ad on a snow globe, and I'm like, okay, coincidence, right? My
Right.
phone reading my mind.
Right.
That was Saturday. Sunday, I went to a golf shop with my husband. On the counter was a golf snow globe.
Wow.
And I
Yeah.
thought, all right, there's something happening.
In
Monday,
March.
in March,
Uh-huh.
Monday, I went to work and I was going into this office I hadn't been in because I hadn't been at this school this very long.
Uh-huh.
And I went into this lady's office. She had been there for 40 years. And I looked to the left, and it's still there to this day. I can ask her for a picture if anybody wants to see it. Is a wall of hundreds of snow globes she had been
You are
collecting
kidding me.
for the 40 years she worked there.
Wow.
She was the special resources lady who had worked there for 40 years, and the students always bought her snow globes. And I didn't know
Wow.
because I was new to the school.
Right.
And I was like, holy moly. Then my son, nobody who's
Uh-huh.
listening can see this, but then my son, who doesn't care about my medium shit at all, him and his wife bought me the snow globe, this Mars snow globe.
That's wild. Yeah, because of your Mars stuff.
And it even has little
Oh, that's so
dust
fun. The
storms.
snow is like the Mars dust storms.
Yeah. So-
Wow.
And now people buy me snow globes. So
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. All the time. It makes me want to give you a snow globe with one. Like, I want to see if I can get one of these merch companies to make a snow globe with one of these sayings on it that we're doing.
yeah, that would be awesome. So what a spirit guide is technically
Uh-huh.
is a soul or spirit in the spirit realm, the higher dimensions, however, heaven, however people define it, that hasn't lived this life with you. It's just like a guardian angel type
Okay.
entity, but we call them spirit guides. Now, some people may pick this apart and say a guardian angel is different from a spirit guide. I'm just using relative.
You're talking to an ignorant layperson in this. Yes, no, I get that. You got to make it. You got to make it understandable.
Yeah, exactly. A spirit guide lives in the spirit world, and you usually have more than one, and they can change, come and go through your life depending on what you need. So they're like a guardian angel ish. That's the best way to describe layman's terms. And you can talk to them. You can ask them to help you with things. You can ask them for guidance. You can tell them anything. You can ask them anything. My spirit guide, my main guide's name is George. Now, they don't have names there, but when you find them, you ask them their name and you hear a name, and that's the name assigned to them because we speak English.
Right.
For sure. In this dimension.
Yes.
So I needed a name I could understand, and that was the first one that popped in my head. And I have another guide called Mother Guide. She's not my mother, but she's a big round lady, and she told me she's Mother Guide. She's there for emergency use only.
Okay, got it.
But you can have your loved ones in spirit. My mother passed in 1986. You can have your loved ones guide you. My mother, I have always felt her presence with me, even through all my scientific studies and my disbelief. I've always felt her there. So she does guide me. And I get a lot of questions from clients about, is my mom my guide? Is my grandma, my uncle, whoever, is my guide? Well, I'm not a big label person.
Yeah.
You want them to be your guide, call them your guide. Nobody's going to care. It's not going to affect you anyway. But technically, your spirit guide always resides in spirit, and your loved ones in spirit can guide you. But it doesn't matter to me what you call them.
So what you're saying is like a spirit guide is somebody who, it was not a person who ever lived.
Yes.
Okay. So
in your lifetime. In your life.
Okay. So it's not somebody you knew, but it was a person?
Possibly.
Okay. Cool. So, you are a scientist who is taking mediumship classes, which may be one of the weirdest sentences I've ever said out loud. And you graduate early. And when was that?
Right at the beginning of COVID.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you graduate early, and how did you get from there to here? Like what happened? How did you integrate? So you were a Catholic. You grew up Catholic with lots of doubts and questions because you were a scientist. You became a scientist, and you were still a Catholic. You were teaching at a Catholic school. Is that correct? Now,
Yep.
let's just be clear. You are allowed to speak this way because you lived in Northern California. I did too. We are allowed to use these kinds of words and talk in these woo-woo weird terms. It's the authorization that gives us. So, but you were teaching at a Catholic school. Like, what? How do you navigate that from there? I mean, like there to here, and you don't live in the same place anymore. But like, yeah, what was that? What did you do?
When I was as far as working at the school and being a medium?
Well, I mean, just belief. I'm talking about your own personal journey of understanding it. And now I have these God beliefs. I have this Catholic heritage. My kids are going all the things, right?
I kind of, because when I was vacillating between Catholicism and agnosticism and atheism,
Right.
I kind of used my scientific mind to understand that nothing can be created, or matter cannot be created or destroyed. It can either be transferred into energy, or the energy has to be transferred back into matter. So my belief is our soul is energy in the quantum state, and it is released from our body, and it never goes away. It always exists and goes into the collective consciousness.
Right.
So kind of like in the old days when they would plug in for the phone calls, the old operator panel, she'd plug it in. I feel like our consciousness kind of plugs into a collective quantum realm.
Right. So like quantum field theory, that like electrons, when we see them as a dot, they're a concentration of a quantum of energy in the quantum field. But then when we aren't observing them that way, they actually disappear back into the field. And then it shows up as a waveform when we're measuring them that way. Like, is that what you're talking about?
The double slit experiment.
The double slit experiment. Yeah.
Exactly. Like
hang on. Let's pause. Let's tell people what this is. This is a really fascinating experiment. I love this experiment. And you can actually, it is so crazy, but you can recreate it yourself with the laser pointer, right? Did you teach science? Is that what you taught?
Yep.
Will you please tell us about the double slit experiment and how we could, if they really wanted to, use a laser pointer? And if not, I know how to do the laser pointer part because
I never did the laser pointer part in my classroom because I taught mostly all boys, and they weren't allowed to have laser pointers because they would blind each other.
Right. No, fair.
Or lightsaber fight.
So go ahead, double slit experiment, go. We're going to shoot photons at a hole in something.
Right. So the double slit experiment is you have like a little piece of cardboard or something, poster board, whatever, and you put two holes in it and you point the light at
slits, it. They're like vertical holes, yeah?
Correct, vertical long slits. You point the light at it, and then you have a screen behind it picking up how the light falls on it. When you're observing it, it makes one pattern. When you're not observing it, it makes another pattern. So metaphysicists use this as an example of, well, how come when we observe it, it does one thing, and when we don't observe it, it does another? Our consciousness is affecting matter.
Right. And so if you have one slit open, it makes on the other side, it makes exactly what you would expect if you're shooting a bullet through a little hole. They will concentrate in the middle and they sort of disperse out to the side. But if you open up a second slit where it can go through both, it doesn't
Has a
make
different
two
pattern.
lines.
It has a different pattern.
It looks like what happens when you drop two rocks into water.
Right. The ripples cross each other.
Right. Where the high part of one wave and a low part of the other wave meet, they cancel each other out. And so you get what's called a wave interference pattern on the other side, which is the nature of a wave, not a particle.
Right.
Which makes people's minds hurt.
Right. Makes your brain explode. That's what I say.
Right.
Science
Okay.
makes your brain explode, especially this stuff. So
Right.
if we're observing something and it has a different effect than when we're not observing it, then our consciousness is affecting matter.
Right. Right.
Our consciousness can affect matter. That opens up a whole new can of worms. I believe our souls are quanta, which are quantum. It's like a photon, but a quantum, different thing.
Mm-hmm.
And because a soul inhabits my body and it's made of these quanta, and we can entangle particles, quantum entanglement.
Yes.
We can cause them to do things from vast distances across space and time. Why couldn't we communicate across space and time with our quanta in our soul with a soul that's in another realm or dimension?
Yeah.
I have a whole playlist on TikTok, Science Proves Mediumship is Real, where I go through different articles, etc., and discuss all of these things.
So that's just, I mean, this is all fascinating. So it sounds like you started to, in some way, unify the beliefs. Like, if I'm listening to you, what I'm hearing is you had scientist person, or early on in your life, you had science and you had faith. And you lean into science, and then eventually you sort of were able to find like a unification between science and faith.
Yes.
And then it sounds like that happened again for you with mediumship.
Yes.
Right. Where you went into it, we're going to figure it out. But then we're a trained medium 6 months later, and now we've got to like do that again. But you've done that work as well. Am I hearing that right?
I'm just weaving my wave in my own special way. Works for me. And you said something that I was going to respond to, and now I can't remember what it was. Oh, the 6 months. I didn't just get trained in 6 months and become a medium and stop taking classes. I don't want anybody to think mediums never stop learning. We always continue taking classes. We always continue learning. We meet with other mediums. We have development circles where we meet together and we do readings together. We critique each other. Now there's a lot of not ethical mediums out there. Ethical mediums always hold each other accountable, and we want to be held accountable. If one of my colleagues sees me going astray, I hope they call me out on it. I hope I never go astray. But,
no, for sure.
But if I did, I've had to ask them questions like, do you think it's ethical? A client asked me to meet with a 5-year-old. Do you think that's ethical if the parent is there? And they have different opinions on that. Some will say it's fine. Some will say it's not. I have to make the ethical decision, what's best for me. In that case, I decided not to do it because I don't want to do harm to a child, even if the parent is there.
Yeah, no, that's right.
Yeah. So we have to there are no real laws in the US to regulate this. So we have to hold ourselves to a high standard.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's such a fascinating journey. And I don't know, I like I said, I hear this path. So for me, I'm always trying to think about sort of plotting stuff on a graph. Right. And you get all these data points.
Yeah.
right? And you can, with enough data, you can say like, oh, what's the next point on the graph?
Mhm.
And maybe if you have enough data, what's the point after that? Right. And as like I just said, like I feel I hear this finding new realms, exploring new fields of study, and then incorporating them into this larger corpus of beliefs and things that really, like, one of the things that I try to help people in my work is to find beliefs that work for them. And by that, I mean beliefs that help them be the best version of themselves and find a purpose greater than themselves. And I very much hear that in you. So there is, what I hear is the pattern of like new thing, incorporation over a long period of time. I wonder if there's another new thing on the horizon for you.
It would not surprise me. I am not one to stay in a rut in one place. I've moved around the country lots, and I've tried a lot of different careers. And it wouldn't surprise me. I think mediumship is definitely here to stay one way or the other. I do plan on expanding my mediumship into getting trained more psychically as well. That's probably my next big step. I do pull oracle and tarot cards, which I never thought I would do in a million years, but that's become a thing I've been adding in lately too, which is bizarrely accurate when I pull them.
Right.
I can't explain it. It just falls that way. And I don't know, I'm guided divinely. I believe all of this is divinely guided by the higher power, God, source, however people define it for themselves. To me, it's all the same. Yeah. God is the all-encompassing term of whatever people think the higher power is in whatever way they believe. Because every culture has some deity. Right.
Yeah, for sure. And I think for me, that's, people will ask me what the I call myself a deep skeptic, also a pastor.
And I love that. I love that. Every time I see that, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to hear what he's going to say.
Thank you. And people often ask me how I can be a skeptic and a pastor. And one of the kernels that I hold on to when I'm not sure if God exists is that throughout all of history, what you were just talking about, every culture has had some sense of a divine being, a deity, like you just choose your afterlife, spiritual, like all of that stuff, a God, even if they don't call it God, and it seems to me there is a level of arrogance to claim that I know something better than like 99% of all the humans who have ever lived. And that is, I can think really highly of myself at times, right? I can have a huge ego sometimes, but not that big. And I know that that's something that it really has always been, or is an anchoring thing for me. And it's one of the things that I tell people when they ask, like, how can I be the two things at the same time?
And I love that you said that. And I will say that is the exact same for science. I work with a lot of scientists. I've been to many scientific conferences. spoken to many highly trained scientists, and some of them can have the most dogmatic science beliefs.
Yeah.
Science isn't supposed to be a belief system.
Right.
You're supposed to
Data.
follow evidence.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why when I originally started having weird experiences, instead of getting a scan, I'm like, let me follow the evidence, because scientists should be the most open-minded people.
Yeah.
Because they have to follow the evidence where it leads them.
Yeah. Well, thank you for telling us your story of following all of that data. It is fascinating. And I am so grateful that you shared that with us.
I am so grateful that you had me on the podcast. I look forward to hearing it and seeing what the response is. And I'm just incredibly grateful to have met you on Zoom instead of on social media.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Hey, one of the things about our community, we call it Not Church, is that we talk about this kind of stuff. We push back. We are there for each other. Sometimes people are in a hard place. And we just have to be there for each other, because that's what you have to do. We do that through Discord, and it is a beautiful place. There are people that claim to be Christian, people that claim to be agnostics, all kinds of people. If you would love to have a place like that, we call it Not Church, because it's like all the things you want from a church without people telling you you're going to hell because you believe the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. Yeah, you'd love it there. You do that by going to patreon.com/skepticpastor, and it's $3 a month. $3 a month, because we're not going to ask you to give us a percentage of your income. You pay for what you get. And and that is the way it goes. Also, we just released some new products. They say, I'm a deep skeptic, also a Christian. There's even a Bible cover. If you're interested in that stuff, like a t-shirt or a mug that says, I'm a deep skeptic, also a Christian, you can go to noomacommunity.com/store, NOOMA community.com/store. You can get them there. And, if you're listening to this, give us all the stars. Say a nice thing. Like, actually make a comment. All those things really do help. That's it. That's the podcast. Shout out to the Choir Network, to Patheos, to Matthew and Keith, who make everything happen. Now, get out of here. Go do something to make the world a better place. Okay? We'll see you next time.